Welcome back to the podcast. I am really excited about today's episode. It is our second in a month-long series here on the podcast that is all about the ethics of leadership. The ethics of leadership, of course, is such an important topic for any coach and any transformational practitioner to really dive into because being in those ethics, using those ethical practices are a big part of what allows us to go deep with our clients, of what allows us to be effective, of what allows us to create trustworthy and vulnerable containers with our clients. And the truth is that even if we are people of integrity, we still need to learn the ethics or the ethical practices of leadership. We don't know them if we're not taught. And there aren't enough spaces and places that teach the ethics of leadership. This is one of the reasons why in Sacred Depths, every single lesson, every single module, we touch on the ethics of leadership. I really believe that this is a topic that not only has the power to help us do better work with our clients, but it's also a topic that can help us create more sustainable businesses. And honestly, it's this topic of ethics of leadership that helps us be a part of seeing the change that we want to see in the world. So we kicked this off on our last episode, episode 26, where I shared a really tough personal story that relates to ethics, and I shared some lessons from that story. I'll pop the link for that in the show notes. And on the topic of the ethics of leadership, I want to let you know that for this month, we have a sale on our fan favorite home study training called Authentic and Effective Enrollment Conversations. If you are looking for a comprehensive training that takes you step by step on how to lead a sales conversation where you can be authentically yourself, in how to lead a sales conversation that is completely ethical and not salesy and not manipulative. And if you want to learn step by step how to lead a sales conversation that is also a transformational process that can help you yield many more clients that are aligned to work with you, then I highly recommend you checking out this training. For this month, it is only $97, which is quite a steal. And for that price, you get 5 hours of step-by-step training, as well as templates and scripts and cheat sheets, all about how to lead authentic and ethical and effective sales conversations. So I'll pop that in the show notes as well. And if you want to toe dip into this topic, take a look at episode 16 of the podcast, where I share 6 elements of authentic and ethical sales conversations. Now, for today's episode is a quickie, but it's also a goodie. And we are looking at the importance of admitting mistakes when we are in a leadership position. So, it probably goes without saying, but I do want to take a moment to talk about why it's so important to be able and willing to admit when we've made a mistake, especially when we're in a leadership position, and especially as coaches or transformational practitioners when we have made a mistake with a client or a group, why it is so important to own up to it. So, number one, when we own up to our mistakes, this is what creates trust and real connection with our clients. And when we create trust and real connection with our clients, that's what leads to us doing our best and most effective work. When we don't admit our mistakes, there is a loss of trust and there is a loss of connection. When we're able to admit our mistakes as leaders, it also allows us to model imperfection. It allows us to model to others and to normalize that as humans, we make mistakes. As humans, we are messy. As humans, we can't always be perfect. But just because we are imperfect, just because we make mistakes, it doesn't mean that we can't fix them as well as work towards the best outcomes possible. Right? There's so much of an idea in this world that the best way is to be perfect. And of course, none of us are perfect, right? And when we pretend as leaders that we are perfect, when we don't admit that we've made mistakes, then it signals to our clients and our communities that it's not okay to make mistakes. And when we are messaging that it's not okay to make mistakes, we are inadvertently creating shame, right? We are inadvertently creating self-judgment that then leads to our clients not be able to take actions themselves. So we actually want to model imperfection and more precisely, we want to model owning our imperfections and making that okay. Of course, so long as we take actions to correct them. And here's the other thing. When you don't admit to your mistakes, it can bring up old wounds for your clients. Wounds where they have been in experiences with figures of authority who didn't admit mistakes. And because of that, trust was lost, right? They're overarching, there are a lot of issues with trust in our society. And that's because very seldomly in our society do we get to witness authority figures who admit to their mistakes, right? The the problem, the bigger problem than the actual mistake is oftentimes the not owning up to it. Right. And we see this happening over and over again, whether it's in politics, whether it's in corporate America and heads of companies, right? Even parents who aren't willing to admit that they've made mistakes to their children. So, these are all of the reasons why this is such an important topic. And I want to share with you a personal story about this one. This month, I'm telling a lot of personal stories because I think that always personal stories are important, but especially when it comes to this overarching topic of the ethics of leadership, I want to normalize a lot of this. So this story goes back at least 10 years ago. And I was at the time leading a training of mine that's called Into the Depths. Some of the listeners here have participated in Into the Depths. Into the Depths is an incredible and epic training on facilitating group programs, group workshops, group retreats, year-long group programs, etc. And Into the Depths is mostly an in-person program. And so I was leading one of the retreats of Into the Depths here in my hometown of Charlotte. And people had flown in from all over the country to be with me for this training. And as part of the training, one of the evenings of the training, I led a ritual to connect with the ancestors. It was an opportunity to model doing a ritual in general, and also a ritual that has to do with the ancestors, with honoring and connecting with those that we have loved that have come before us. And I was pretty tired going into this evening ritual. I had planned on two retreats back to back. So I had already been facilitating another retreat for 3 or 4 days. And at this point, I was in my fifth day of retreat leading. And so I was a little tired and not completely at the top of my game. Anyway, we had a beautiful, beautiful ceremony and ritual. We called in the ancestors, the loved ones that had come before us through the generations. And we had taken time to honor them and taken time to connect with them and to receive wisdom from them. It was really beautiful. By the end of the ceremony, when it was time to close, as I said, I was tired and we kind of came to the end of the ceremony. I closed us out. I wished everybody there a good night and said I was excited to see them in the morning, where we would break down, how I facilitated that circle. Well, on my way driving home that evening, after I closed that ceremony, I realized that I had forgotten to do something really important before I closed the ceremony. I had forgotten to release the ancestors from our container. So traditionally in ritual, we invite in ancestors if we're going to invite them. And then at the end of the ceremony, we also invite them to leave. And I had forgotten to do that. And I thought to myself as I realized this on my drive home, oh goodness, I can't believe I forgot that, especially because I was modeling how to facilitate, and I hope that it's going to be okay. I went to sleep that night, woke up the next morning, came back into the retreat space, and I often start mornings of retreats with everybody sitting in a circle, and everybody has an opportunity to share what's moving through them, what's resonating, etc. And so we all sat down in circle, and each woman there shared. And as the women were sharing around the circle, woman by woman, there were some interesting shares. And one woman said, the ceremony last night was so wonderful. But then I was up all night because I felt like my grandmother was still in the room with me and it was freaking me out. And the next woman shared and she said, oh, I had this unsettled feeling all night and I don't know why. I felt like my ancestors were still there. And so it went, not every person shared like this, but easily a good three or four women in the circle had similar shares. And as this was happening, I was sitting there as each woman was speaking and thinking, oh my goodness, this is because I didn't release the ancestors. I made a mistake. And I'll tell you, it would have been so easy for me to not admit the mistake that I made. Nobody there knew. I was in a position of authority and power because I was the leader of the group, right? And I could have just let everybody had their shares and continued on. But of course, I knew that that would not be the right thing, that that wouldn't be the ethical thing. And so after everyone shared, even though it was so hard, and even though I was so scared that the group would judge me, that people would ask for their money back, et cetera, et cetera, I put on my big girl panties, as I like to say. I took a deep breath. I looked at everyone in the circle, and with compassion for myself and with trust for the circle, I said, I want you all to know that one of the reasons why some of you had these experiences where you felt like your ancestor was still there might be because I made a mistake last night. And I explained to them what had happened. And there was a moment of silence after I stopped speaking. And I was so nervous. I was just so nervous. People would get angry and upset and even maybe walk out of the room. But here's what happened instead. As I looked at the faces of the women around the room, they were filled with so much love. And there was such a feeling of connection in the room. And more than one woman shared with the circle such complete gratitude that I had owned up to a mistake, that they got to witness a leader say, I am so, so, so sorry, but I made a mistake. And as these women were sharing, they were saying how healing it was because it helped them feel safer, even safer in the community, and that it was so different than what had happened for them in parental situations, situations with their own parents or with teachers, etc., etc. As a whole, it brought the entire group together even more. It created an even tighter container. And while at that ceremony, I didn't get to model one of the skills that I had wanted to model, which was how to release the ancestors. As it turned out at the retreat, I got to model for all of the facilitators in that group who were there to be trained on how to be better facilitators. I got to model something much, much more important for them, right? I got to model how to be a leader who admits mistakes. So, as we think about this as a concept, the next question is, what is it that you need to know and believe in order to be the kind of leader, the kind of coach, the kind of practitioner who admits their mistakes. Well, I'll share a couple things on this that I think will be helpful for you so that you can have the courage to do this when it's appropriate. First thing to know about the ability to admit our mistakes is this. Most of the time, when it feels hard to admit that we've made a mistake, it's because we're scared, right? Most of the time, we don't admit mistakes or we have trouble admitting mistakes because we're scared. We're scared that others will get angry at us. We're scared that if we reveal the mistake or own up to the mistake, others will be disappointed in us. We're scared that others might not think highly of us if they see that we've made a mistake. They might not think that we're worthy enough or expert enough, right? They might think that we're bad if we show that we've made a mistake. And by the way, this is one of the reasons why so many children lie. It is part of it is developmental, and part of that is because children are scared of disappointing their parents, right? If they reveal that they've made a mistake, they don't want their parents to see the mistakes because they want their parents to think highly of them. And so many of I have two daughters, and um, I have really worked so hard over these years as a parent to create an environment in our home where my children know that no matter what mistake they make, I love them. I think so highly of them. I think they are worthy no matter what. I like to think that that's helped a bit, though I will say my children still do lie sometimes. And so, along with this, and along with this fear that is at the root, oftentimes, of why it's hard to admit mistakes, I want to remind you that, again, it is okay to make mistakes. And we can only correct them if we're willing to admit them. The most trusting, vulnerable, and productive relationships are based on honesty and the ability to admit mistakes and correct mistakes. And we want to have these kinds of relationships with our clients, right? So, you may, if as I'm sharing this, you are recognizing the fears that you have around this, you may also want to work on those fears, right? Those fears of disappointing others, those fears that others may not think highly of you, et cetera, et cetera. This is one of the reasons why in Sacred Depths, we really learn how to befriend fears and work with them somatically. I believe that the world would be a better place if more leaders on every level, from politicians to teachers to leaders of organizations to practitioners to parents, I believe that the world would be a better place if more leaders would own up to the mistakes that they've made. These are the best ways to move forward. I hope that you enjoyed this episode and that it is inspiring for you. I'd love to hear what you've learned and your thoughts. As always, please connect in with me. You can email, you can join the Coaching Revolution Facebook group. I am there pretty much every day of the week and connecting with people there. And another reminder, if you want to learn how to lead sales conversations that are highly effective, that are transformational processes, and that are also incredibly ethical and non-salesy, then please take a look at the Authentic and Effective Sales Conversation Home Study. It is right now almost 70% off the regular rate at only $97, and I will drop those links in the show notes. For now, my friends, I am wishing you well and looking forward to being with you next time.